On June 15, 2024, at Holy Cross Church in North Dallas, two people were stabbed to death less than an hour before the start of a wedding ceremony, and the killer was among the guests. Carlton Jenkins had been working as a logistics manager for a transportation company for 6 years. The job was stable, though not particularly exciting, monitoring freight shipments, coordinating routes, endless calls to drivers and customers. At 29, he did not dream of a career as a top manager. He was content with a predictable life with a fixed salary and the ability to plan for the future. 3 years ago, he met Marisol Villarreal at a barbecue hosted by mutual friends. She worked as a nurse at a private clinic on the outskirts of Dallas, was calm, attentive, and a good listener. Carlton fell in love quickly. Marisol reciprocated his feelings, and a year later he proposed to her. They planned the wedding for a long time, carefully choosing every detail, from the flowers on the tables to the music at the reception. Carlton wanted the day to be perfect. His mother, Madison Wells, worked as an accountant for an insurance company and always approached life with practicality and calculation. After divorcing Carlton's father, she lived alone for several years until she met Bob Wells, a tax auditor with the Internal Revenue Service. Bob was a quiet, methodical man who rarely raised his voice and preferred to spend his evenings at the computer studying tax returns. Madison married him 5 years ago. Carlton accepted his stepfather without much enthusiasm, but also without hostility. Bob did not try to replace his father and kept his distance, which suited everyone. Carlton's younger sister, Kira, worked as an administrator and lived alone in a small apartment in the south of the city. The family was ordinary, unremarkable, and Carlton did not expect his wedding to be anything more than a happy event in their measured lives. On the morning of June 15th, Carlton woke up in the apartment of his friend Daryl, who was his best man. He had spent the night before the wedding there, as was tradition. The bride and groom should not see each other before the ceremony. Carlton was nervous, but it was a pleasant nervousness mixed with anticipation. He checked his suit several times, adjusted his tie, and glanced at his watch. Daryl and the other 3 friends teased him, trying to lighten the mood, but Carlton was barely listening to them. His thoughts were occupied with Marisol, the ceremony, the future. He imagined her walking into the church, them exchanging vows, the beginning of their life together. At 9:45 a.m., Carlton and his 4 friends arrived at Holy Cross Church. The building was old, built in the early 1990s, with a tall bell tower and stained glass windows. The parking lot was already filled with guests' cars. Carlton got out of the car, looked around the church, and took a deep breath. His friends surrounded him, patting him on the shoulder and saying something, but he could hardly hear their words. His heart was pounding in his chest, and his palms were slightly sweaty. He stepped toward the entrance. The church hall was cool and quiet. High ceilings, wooden benches, the smell of polish and incense. Guests were sitting in the main hall, talking quietly, adjusting their clothes. Carlton walked through the hall to the side staircase leading to the second floor, where the preparation rooms were located. He wanted to see Marisol for a second, even though he knew it was against tradition. But as he climbed a few steps, the door to the bridal room opened, and Marisol stepped out into the hallway. She was wearing a white wedding dress with a long train and lace bodice. Her hair was styled in a high updo, and her veil was secured with a small tiara. Marisol smiled when she saw Carlton. He froze on the steps, unable to look away. She looked exactly as he had imagined. Marisol descended the stairs toward him, stopping a step away. "You're not supposed to see me before the ceremony," she said quietly. But the smile never left her face. "I know," Carlton replied. "I just wanted to make sure you were here." Marisol touched his hand. "I'm here. Everything will be fine, Carl." He nodded. They stood silently for a few seconds. Then Marisol turned and walked back to the bridal room. Carlton watched her until the door closed. Then he slowly descended the stairs. His mother and sister were waiting for him in the hall. Madison Wells was standing by a column near the stairs. Her face was pale, her eyes red and swollen, as if she had been crying. Kira was holding her mother's elbow and looked tense herself. Carlton frowned and moved closer. "Mom, what's wrong?" he asked. Madison didn't answer right away. She looked at her son, then at the guests passing by on their way to the main hall. Kira quickly took her brother's hand. "Carl, let's go. We need to talk. It's urgent," Kira said quietly but insistently. "About what?" "The ceremony starts in half an hour." Carlton tried to free his hand, but Kira held on tight. "Please," Madison added. Her voice trembled. "It's important." Carlton looked at his mother, then at his sister. Something was wrong. He let Kira lead him into a side corridor, away from the guests. They walked through a narrow passageway, past closed doors, and entered a small choir room. There were old chairs and music stands, and it smelled of dust and wood. Kira closed the door behind her. Madison sank into a chair and covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders shook. Carlton looked at his sister in confusion. "Kira, what's going on? Mom, you're scaring me." Madison raised her head. Tears were streaming down her cheeks. She wiped them away with her palm, but new ones immediately appeared. "Carlisle, I have something to tell you," she began, her voice breaking. "I don't know how. It's terrible. I only found out last night, and this morning God, I can't believe it." "Mom, please talk to me." Carlisle crouched down in front of her and took her hands. "What happened?" Madison sniffed and tried to pull herself together. "Marisol," she began and fell silent, as if the words were stuck in her throat. "Marisol was cheating on you." Carlton froze. He looked at his mother, not understanding. "What?" "She was cheating on you, Carl," Madison repeated. "With Bob, your stepfather. They had an affair. For more than 8 months. Carlton slowly let go of his mother's hands and stood up. He looked at Kira. She was standing by the door, biting her lip, looking away. "Is this some kind of joke?" he asked quietly. "No." Madison stood up and walked over to her son. "No, Carl, this is not a joke. I wouldn't joke about something like this. I saw them 3 weeks ago. Marisol came to our house and said she wanted to discuss the wedding details. I was in the kitchen, then I went out to the garage to get a box of decorations. They were there, Bob and Marisol. They were kissing. I saw it with my own eyes." Carlton took a step back. His head was spinning. "Why didn't you tell me then?" he squeezed out. "I didn't know what to do," Madison cried again. "I thought maybe it was something accidental. Maybe I was wrong. But last night I found Bob's medical records in his office. He left them on the table. Carl, he's been diagnosed with HIV." Carlton felt the floor slip away beneath his feet. He grabbed the back of a chair. "What?" "Bob has HIV, Madison repeated. "He was diagnosed 3 weeks ago." I couldn't keep quiet any longer. This morning, before we left for church, I talked to him. I asked him directly about Marisol. He confessed, Carl. He said they had an affair, that he got it from her. Marisol was infected. She was hiding it. Even from you. Carlton couldn't breathe. His mother's words hit him like a hammer blow. Marisol, Bob, HIV, affair, 8 months. He tried to say something, but only a wheeze came out of his throat. "Bob asked me not to tell you," Madison continued. "He begged me to wait until after the wedding so as not to cause a scandal, to keep it a secret. But I can't, Carl. I can't let you marry this woman. She's sick. She slept with your stepfather. She lied to you all this time. I had to tell you." Carlton stood motionless. Something inside him was turning, twisting into a tight knot. Marisol's face in her wedding dress flashed before his eyes. Her smile, her words. "Everything will be fine, Carl. Lies." It was all a lie. "Where are they?" he asked hoarsely. "What?" Madison wiped away her tears. "Where are Marisol and Bob? Where are they now?" "I don't know," his mother replied. Bob is somewhere here in the church. Marisol is upstairs in the bridal room. Carl, please don't do anything rash. But Carlton wasn't listening anymore. A wave of rage rose inside him, so strong that he couldn't hold it back. His face contorted, his hands clenched into fists. He turned toward the door. I have to talk to them, he said through clenched teeth. I have to talk to both of them, right now. Before this damn ceremony starts, call Bob to the bridal room. Carl, wait! Kira tried to stop him, but he pushed her hand away. Don't touch me! Madison stepped toward her son and grabbed his shoulder. Carlisle, please calm down. Let's think about what to do. He broke free, threw open the door, and stepped out into the hallway. His footsteps echoed in the empty space. Madison and Kira remained in the choir room, watching him go. Carlisle walked quickly without looking back, heading for the stairs. At 10:50 a.m. on June 15th, a dark blue Dallas Police Department sedan pulled up to Holy Cross Church. At the wheel was Detective Emma Lansbury, 34 years old, a forensic specialist with 8 years of experience in the homicide division. Next to her was Detective Owen Harding, 41, a lead investigator with 15 years of police experience. Harding had received the call 20 minutes earlier, while he and Lansbury were finishing their coffee in the office after a night shift on another case. The dispatcher reported a double homicide at a church, the victims being a bride and a member of the groom's family, with the circumstances unclear. Harding grabbed his car keys, Lansbury grabbed her tablet with the documents, and they were on their way in 5 minutes. When the detectives arrived, the area was already cordoned off with yellow tape. 3 patrol cars were parked at the main entrance, and 2 more were in the side parking lot. An ambulance with its lights off was parked near the far wing of the building. About 70 people were crowded behind the cordon in the parking lot, women in bright, fancy dresses, men in formal suits and ties. They were the wedding guests. Many were crying, wiping their tears with handkerchiefs and napkins. Others stood silently, in shock, their faces blank, unable to believe what had happened. Several women hugged each other, trying to comfort each other. The men gathered in small groups, talking in hushed voices, shaking their heads. Harding got out of the car, adjusted his jacket, and walked over to the officer standing at the church entrance. It was Sergeant Trevor Mackenzie, a short, stocky man in his 40s with a crew cut. Lansbury followed Harding, holding a clipboard and a camera. Sergeant, report the situation, Harding said, showing his badge. Mackenzie nodded and took out his notebook. Detective Harding, Detective Lansbury, the call came in at 10:37 a.m. The bodies were discovered at 10:35 a.m. 2 bodies, both with stab wounds. The victims are Marisol Villarreal, 27, the bride, and Bob Wells, 56, the groom's stepfather. The crime scene is a small church supply room on the first floor, at the far end of the building, east wing. The bodies were discovered by the groom and his mother. They called us immediately. The area has been cordoned off, and witnesses are being held for questioning. Forensic experts are already working inside. The murder weapon? Lansbury asked. Not found. Presumably a knife with a long blade, judging by the nature of the wounds. But this is still inaccurate information. Witnesses? Did anyone see any suspicious persons? We are questioning the guests. So far, no one has reported anything specific. The church is large, with many corridors and rooms. It's easy to go unnoticed. Harding nodded. Show us the crime scene. Mackenzie led the detectives inside the church. They walked through the main hall with its high ceilings and stained glass windows and turned into a side corridor. Harding and Lansbury put on shoe covers and gloves and entered the room. It was a small room, about 4 meters by 5, with wooden shelves along the walls. On the shelves were boxes, candles, metal candlesticks, altar cloths, and old books. The window was tall and narrow, letting in little light. In the center of the room, on the floor, lay 2 bodies. Marisol Villarreal was wearing a white wedding dress. The lace bodice was soaked with blood, a dark stain spreading from her chest to her waist. Her veil was askew, her hair disheveled. Her face was pale, her eyes open, staring at the ceiling. Her mouth was slightly open. There were 3 deep knife wounds, 2 in her chest and 1 in her stomach. Blood had spread around her body in a dark pool, soaking into the fabric of her dress. Her right arm was stretched out to the side, her left arm lay on her stomach. Bob Wells lay next to her. Gray suit, white shirt, dark blue tie. 2 large blood stains on his shirt, in the chest area. 2 stab wounds to the chest, 1 deep wound to the neck, on the right. Blood flooded the collar of his shirt and dripped onto the floor. His face was contorted, his mouth open, his eyes closed. His right arm was bent, his hand clenched into a fist. His left arm lay alongside his body. Lansbury crouched down next to Marisol's body and carefully examined the wounds without touching them. Harding walked around the room, studying the scene. An overturned box lay on the floor by the wall, candles spilling out of it. Several candlesticks had fallen from the shelf, one lying at Bob Wells's feet. There were few signs of a struggle. It appeared to have been a sudden and swift attack. "The wounds are deep and penetrating," Lansbury said as she stood up. The attacker struck with force. Marisol has 3 wounds, Bob Wells has 3 wounds. All in vital areas. Death occurred quickly within a few minutes. The weapon was probably a knife with a blade between 15 and 20 centimeters long, judging by the depth of the wounds. "No defensive wounds?" Harding asked. "I don't see any on Marisol's hands. Bob Wells's right hand is clenched, possibly in an attempt to grab the attacker, but that needs to be checked during the autopsy. There are no defensive cuts visible on the palms." The detectives left the room. Mackenzie was waiting for them in the hallway. "Where are the groom and his mother?" Harding asked. "In the small hall on the first floor, next to the main hall. The groom's sister and several close relatives are there too. They are waiting for you." Harding and Lansbury walked back down the hallway and turned into a side door. The small hall was a small room with a round table and several chairs used for church meetings. 4 people were sitting there. Carlton Jenkins sat on a chair by the window, slumped over, his elbows on his knees, his face in his hands. His mother, Madison Wells, stood next to him with her hand on his shoulder. Her eyes were red, and her face was swollen from crying. Across the table from them sat a young woman holding a crumpled napkin and staring at the floor. It was Kira Jenkins, the groom's sister. Next to her stood an elderly man in a suit, gray-haired, with a tired face, the pastor of the church, Reverend Samuel Clark. Harding and Lansbury entered the room. Carlton raised his head and looked at them with empty eyes. Madison straightened up and wiped her tears. "Mr. Jenkins, Mrs. Wells, I'm Detective Owen Harding. This is Detective Emma Lansbury." Harding introduced himself. "I'm very sorry for your loss. I understand this is a difficult time, but we need to ask you a few questions. It will help us find the person who did this." Carlton nodded slowly, saying nothing. Madison swallowed and nodded. "Mr. Jenkins, please tell us how you discovered the bodies," Harding asked, taking out his notebook. Carlton was silent for a few seconds, then spoke. His voice was hoarse and breaking. My mom and I, around 10:30, maybe a little earlier, my mom said Bob was missing. She hadn't seen him for 20 minutes, maybe more. Bob is my stepfather. Mom was worried that he had gone somewhere, that he might be sick. I said I would go look for him. Then I thought I should check on Marisol, my fiancée. Mom came with me. We searched the church, looking in different rooms. Then we reached a long corridor in the east wing. There was a door to a room that was slightly ajar. I went over, looked inside, and saw. His voice broke, and Carlton closed his eyes. I saw Marisol on the floor, in a pool of blood. Bob was lying next to her. I screamed. My mother came in and screamed too. I tried to check Marisol's pulse, but her hand was cold. She wasn't breathing. Neither was Bob. My mother called the police. I don't remember exactly what happened next. Everything is a blur. Madison stood nearby, holding onto the back of her son's chair. She added, repeating Carlton's words, "I was really worried about Bob. He had gone somewhere, and I hadn't seen him for a long time. The ceremony was supposed to start at 11, and he was nowhere to be found. Carlton volunteered to help find him. We went together. We found that room. God, I still can't believe it. Who could have done this?" "Who?" Madison's voice trembled, and she began to cry again. Carlton reached out and took her hand. Lansbury recorded the testimony on her tablet, and Harding asked the next question. "Did you see anyone suspicious in the church before you discovered the bodies? Maybe someone coming out of that hallway, someone you don't know?" Carlton shook his head. "No. No one. The hallway was empty. Just my mother and me." "Mrs. Wells?" "I didn't see anyone either," Madison replied. "Mr. Jenkins, do you know why your fiancé and your stepfather might have been together in that room?" Lansbury asked. Carlton looked at her and frowned. "I don't know. I have no idea. It doesn't make sense. Marisol should have been in the bridal suite on the second floor. Bob was usually in the main hall greeting guests. I don't know why they were there. Maybe they agreed to meet for some reason? To discuss something? What would they have to talk about?" Carlton clenched his fists. "I don't understand. Someone killed them. Someone stabbed my fiancé and my stepfather. This is a nightmare. This can't be true." He covered his face with his hands again. Madison leaned over and hugged her son's shoulders. Harding turned his attention to Kira Jenkins. "Miss Jenkins, did you see anything unusual this morning?" Kira looked up. She looked scared, nervous. Her fingers fiddled with a napkin, tearing it into small pieces. Yes, I saw someone," she said quietly. "Around 10:15, maybe a little later. I went outside to the side entrance to get some fresh air. There was a man there. Black, about 45, maybe 50. He was wearing a dark jacket and jeans. Not a suit, not like a guest. He was standing at the entrance, looking around, nervous. I thought he was lost and wanted to ask if he needed help, but he quickly turned away and went inside the church, into the side corridor. I didn't follow him, thinking he had simply gone through the wrong door." "Can you describe him in more detail?" Lansbury asked. "He was of average height, with a strong build, short hair, short cropped beard, dark blue or black jacket, I don't remember exactly. Dark jeans, too. I only saw him for a few seconds." "Are you willing to help with a sketch?" Kira nodded. "Yes, of course, if it helps." Harding wrote down the information and exchanged glances with Lansbury. The version with a stranger seemed plausible. Perhaps it was a robbery that didn't go according to plan, or an attack with another motive. It was necessary to check the surveillance cameras, if there were any, and interview the other guests. "Thank you for the information," Harding said. "Miss Jenkins, we will contact you later to compile a photo fit. Mr. Jenkins, Mrs. Wells, if you remember anything else, please let us know immediately. Here is my card." He handed the card to Carlton. Carlton took it without looking at it and put it in his jacket pocket. The detectives left the room. In the hallway, Lansbury stopped and looked at Harding. "What do you think?" "The family seems genuinely shocked," Harding replied. "Carlton Jenkins is in shock, as is his mother. His sister is nervous, but that's understandable. So far, there's no reason to suspect them. The theory of an outside man seems logical. We need to check the cameras, interview all the guests, and find witnesses who may have seen this man." "I agree," Lansbury nodded. "But it's still strange that the bride and the groom's stepfather were together in the back room. That needs an explanation. Perhaps one of them saw a suspicious person, went to check it out, and the other followed. Or they were lured there. We need more information." Harding questioned the other groomsmen, but no one had seen anything suspicious. Everyone was busy preparing for the ceremony and was in different parts of the church. One of the friends, a stocky man named Levi Simmons, recalled that Carlton had looked agitated, even a little angry, around 10 o'clock in the morning, but he attributed it to pre-wedding nerves. Lansbury, meanwhile, was interviewing the bride's guests. Most of them had arrived between 9:30 and 10 a.m., sat down in the main hall, and waited for the ceremony to begin. No one had entered the East Wing where the murder took place. No one had heard screams or the sounds of a struggle. The church was large, and sound did not travel well through the corridors. The bride's mother, Lucia Villarreal, an elderly woman with gray hair and eyes red from crying, sat on a bench in the hall, comforted by relatives. Lansbury approached her cautiously and sat down next to her. "Mrs. Villarreal, I'm so sorry about your daughter. I know this is incredibly difficult, but I need to ask you a few questions." Lucia nodded and wiped her tears with a handkerchief. "Go ahead. Do you know if your daughter had any problems? Conflicts with anyone? Maybe someone threatened her?" "No." Lucia shook her head. "Marisol was a good girl. She worked as a nurse, helping people. She loved Carlton and was getting ready for the wedding. She didn't have any problems. Who could have done this? Who could have killed my girl on her wedding day?" Her voice broke, and she began to cry again. Lansbury put her hand on her shoulder and gave her time to calm down. "Did you know Bob Wells, the groom's stepfather?" "I saw him a few times at family gatherings. He was a quiet man who worked for the tax office. We hardly ever spoke. I don't know why they ended up together. I don't understand anything." Lansbury thanked Lucia and returned to Harding. They exchanged information. "We have almost nothing," Lansbury said. "No one saw or heard anything. The only thing we have is Kira Jenkins's testimony about a strange man. We need to check the surveillance cameras." "I've already asked Sergeant Mackenzie to collect the recordings," Harding replied. "But there aren't many cameras in the church, mostly in the parking lot and at the main entrance. There are almost none inside." "Then the photo fit is our main lead." By noon, most of the guests had been released. The officers recorded their contact information and took their statements. The forensic team finished their work at the crime scene, and the bodies were taken to the morgue for autopsies. The church was empty, but the cordon remained in place. Harding and Lansbury returned to the car and sat inside. "What do we have?" Harding asked, leaning back in his seat. Lansbury looked through the notes on her tablet. 2 bodies, stab wounds, murder weapon not found. The victims are the bride and the groom's stepfather. The motive is unclear. The connection between the victims is not obvious. Why were they together in the back room? The only witness is the groom's sister, who saw a strange man in a dark jacket. There are no other leads. "The robbery theory doesn't seem convincing," Harding said. "Nothing of value was taken from the victims. Marisol had jewelry and a wedding ring on her finger, and Bob Wells had a wallet in his pocket with cash and credit cards. If this was a robbery, the robber took nothing." "Then what? Revenge? Personal animosity?" "Possibly. We need to check the victims' backgrounds. Bob Wells worked for the Internal Revenue Service, doing tax audits. He could have made enemies. Marisol Villarreal was a nurse. It's hard to imagine she had enemies, but we need to check." Harding started the car. Lansbury looked at the church through the window. The tall bell tower, stained glass windows, police tape around the parking lot. It should have been a celebration, a wedding, the beginning of a new life. Instead, 2 dead bodies and a family in mourning. On Monday, June 17th, Detectives Harding and Lansbury sat in the office of the Dallas Police Department's Homicide Division. On the table in front of them were folders containing case files for 2024-06-15, crime scene photos, interrogation reports, preliminary autopsy results. Harding studied the photos of the bodies of Marisol Villarreal and Bob Wells taken in the sacristy. Lansbury reviewed witness statements on her tablet. "The main question remains unanswered," Harding said, putting the photos aside. "Why were the bride and the groom's stepfather together in that far room before the ceremony? There's no logical explanation for it." Lansbury nodded. "None of the guests saw them go there. No one heard them arrange to meet. It's strange." Harding stood up and walked over to the board where the photos of the victims and a diagram of the church were pinned. Let's assume the target was Bob Wells. He worked as a tax auditor for the Internal Revenue Service. That kind of job makes enemies. Someone could have held a grudge after an audit, lost their business, or been prosecuted. Marisol happened to be nearby, witnessed it, and the killer eliminated her too. Then, we need to check Bob Wells' cases from the last few years, Lansbury said. Find those who might have had a motive for revenge. I've already requested information from the IRS. They should send a list of cases Bob Wells handled. We'll check each one. Lansbury opened another folder. The autopsy results came in this morning. Marisol Villarreal died from 3 stab wounds, 2 to the chest, 1 to the abdomen. The lung, liver, and major blood vessels were damaged. Death occurred within 3 to 5 minutes. Bob Wells, 2 wounds to the chest, 1 to the neck, damage to the heart and carotid artery. Death occurred more quickly, within 1 to 2 minutes. The murder weapon was a knife with a blade about 18 centimeters long, double-edged. The killer knew where to strike, Harding noted. All the blows were precise and lethal, either a professional or acting in a state of intense emotion with great force. Lansbury continued reading the report, then paused and frowned. Owen, there's something interesting here. Antiretroviral drugs were found in Bob Wells' blood, drugs for treating HIV infection. Harding turned to her. HIV? Yes. I requested the victim's medical records by court order. Look. She opened the file on her tablet. Bob Wells was diagnosed with HIV on May 28th of this year, 3 weeks ago. He started antiretroviral therapy. Harding moved closer and looked at the screen. What about Marisol? Lansbury scrolled through the documents and opened Marisol Villarreal's medical records. She tested positive for HIV 8 months ago, in October 2023. She was also receiving treatment. Harding and Lansbury looked at each other. A few seconds of silence. This can't be a coincidence, Harding said quietly. No, Lansbury agreed. They had an intimate relationship. Bob got it from Marisol. An affair. The groom's stepfather and the bride. That changes everything. The motive for the murder becomes obvious. Harding returned to the table, sat down, and rested his hands on the tabletop. The groom found out about the affair, maybe about the HIV too. He killed them both in a fit of rage. But then why didn't the family tell us about it? The mother, the sister, they kept quiet. They testified as if they knew nothing. Maybe they were covering for Carlton. The mother didn't want to lose her son. They came up with a story about a stranger to divert suspicion. Lansbury nodded. Kira saw a non-existent man in a dark jacket. False testimony. We need to put pressure on the mother. She's the weak link. If she confesses, the case will be solved. Let's go to Madison Wells, right now. 40 minutes later, the detectives pulled up to Madison Wells's house in the suburbs of Dallas. It was a 1-story brick house with a small yard and a garage. Madison's car was parked in the driveway. Harding and Lansbury got out of the car, walked up to the front door, and knocked. Madison opened it a few seconds later. She was in her home clothes, her hair disheveled, her face gaunt. Her eyes were red from crying. Detective Harding, Detective Lansbury, she said quietly. Is something wrong? Mrs. Wells, we need to talk to you. May we come in? Madison hesitated, then nodded and stepped aside. The detectives entered the house. The living room was tidy, with family photos on the coffee table. Madison, Bob, Carlton, Kira. The happy faces in the pictures contrasted with the gloomy atmosphere. Please have a seat, Madison said, pointing to the sofa. The detectives sat down. Madison sat across from them, her hands clasped in her lap. Mrs. Wells, we have received the autopsy results and medical records of the victims, Harding began. Your husband, Bob Wells, was diagnosed with HIV 3 weeks ago. Marisol Villarreal's HIV-positive status was established 8 months ago. Madison turned pale. Her lips trembled. I don't understand what you're talking about. Mrs. Wells, the medical records prove that your husband and your son's fiancée likely had an intimate relationship. Bob was infected by Marisol. Madison closed her eyes and swayed in her chair. The question is, did you know about this affair? Harding continued. And did your son Carlton know? No, Madison whispered. I didn't know anything. Are you sure? Lansbury took out her tablet and opened a file. We checked the surveillance camera footage near the church. The photo fit of the man in the dark jacket that your daughter Kira allegedly saw did not match anyone in the recordings. Moreover, the cameras did not record anyone else at that time. Your daughter lied. Madison opened her eyes and looked at the detectives. Her face contorted. Why did she lie, Mrs. Wells? Harding asked harshly. To protect her brother? To divert suspicion from Carlton? No, You knew about the affair. You told Carlton on the morning of June 15th, before the ceremony. He found out that his fiancée had been cheating on him with his stepfather, that they both had HIV. He lost his temper and killed them both. And you and Kira decided to cover for him, coming up with a story about an outside killer. Madison covered her face with her hands and began to shake. A sob escaped her throat. Mrs. Wells, if you don't tell the truth now, you will be charged with complicity in double murder, Lansbury said firmly. You will spend the rest of your life in prison. But if you help us, if you tell us what really happened, we can reduce the charges. You will receive the minimum sentence for obstruction of justice, a few years instead of life. Madison cried, her head bowed. Harding waited, then added more gently, We understand that you wanted to protect your son. Any mother would have done the same. But 2 people are dead, Mrs. Wells. Justice must be served. Carlton must answer for what he did. There was a few seconds of silence. Then Madison lifted her head. Her face was wet with tears, her eyes red. I saw them, she whispered. 3 weeks ago, Bob and Marisol. They were kissing in the garage. I couldn't believe it. Then I found Bob's medical records, HIV. I realized it wasn't a casual fling. They had been seeing each other for months. I confronted Bob on the morning of June 15th, before leaving for church. He confessed. He said he had contracted it from her. He asked me not to tell Carlton so as not to ruin the wedding, but I couldn't keep quiet. I told Carlton at church, in the choir room. Kira was with me. Carlton. He was beside himself. He said he had to talk to them. He left. I didn't know what he was going to do. I swear, I didn't know. Her voice broke, and she started crying again. What happened next? Harding asked. Kira and I waited. Carlton came back in about 20 minutes. He was pale. His hands were shaking. He said, Mom, we have to find them. Bob is gone. Marisol too. Let's go look for them. I understood from the look in his eyes. I understood what he had done. But he's my son. I couldn't turn him in. We went with him, found the room, discovered the bodies. We called the police. And Kira came up with the story about the stranger to divert suspicion. Did Carlton kill them both? Madison nodded. Yes. He confessed to me later, when we were alone. He said he couldn't stop himself. That Marisol begged him to forgive her, and Bob tried to justify himself. Carlton took a knife from the church kitchen when he went to them. He stabbed Bob first, then Marisol. They died quickly. Lansbury recorded the testimony. Harding looked at Madison. Mrs. Wells, are you ready to give official testimony and help us arrest your son? Madison was silent, then slowly nodded. Yes, I'm tired of lying. Let it all end. Harding took out his phone. Here's what we'll do. You call Carlton and ask him to come to your house. Tell him you're not feeling well and need to talk about Bob. He'll come, and we'll arrest him here without any fuss. In return, we'll negotiate with the prosecutor to reduce the charges against you and Kira. Agreed. Madison wiped her tears and picked up the phone from the table with trembling hands. I agree. She dialed the number and held the phone to her ear. After a few rings, someone answered. "Carlisle, it's Mom. Please come over right away. I'm not feeling well. We need to talk about Bob." "Yes, right now, please." Her voice was trembling, but she held on. Carlisle said something, and Madison nodded. "Okay, I'll be waiting for you." She hung up and put the phone on the table. "He'll be here in half an hour." Harding called the station and requested backup. 20 minutes later, 2 more cars pulled up to the house, and plainclothes officers took up positions around the perimeter. Harding and Lansbury waited in the living room with Madison. She sat motionless, staring out the window. On June 18th at 4:40 p.m., Carlton Jenkins' car pulled up to the house. He parked on the driveway and got out. He was wearing jeans and a shirt and looked tired. He walked to the front door. Harding and Lansbury came out of the house, followed by 4 officers. Carlton stopped when he saw them, his face contorted with fear. "Carlton Jenkins, you are under arrest on suspicion of the murder of Marisol Villarreal and Bob Wells," Harding said, taking out his handcuffs. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in court. You have the right to an attorney." Carlton stood motionless. He looked at the house and saw his mother in the window. Madison stood behind the glass, tears streaming down her cheeks. She turned away, unable to bear her son's gaze. The officers approached Carlton, handcuffed him, and led him to the car. He did not resist or say a word. Lansbury got behind the wheel, and Harding sat next to Carlton in the back seat. The car drove away from the house. In February 2025, a jury found Carlton Jenkins guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The prosecutor presented medical records proving the affair between Marisol Villarreal and Bob Wells, Madison Wells's testimony, and forensic evidence. The defense tried to prove that Carlton acted in the heat of passion, but the jury did not accept this argument. Carlton Jenkins received 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole. Madison Wells and Kira Jenkins pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice and perjury. Madison was sentenced to 3 years in prison, Kira to 2. Both are serving their sentences at a women's correctional facility in Texas. The Holy Cross Church case was closed.